Everyone. Hope you're all doing well.
Morning, Sharon.
I'm feeling like it should just now be turning March and not actually December, so struggling with the continued time warp that is a global pandemic. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's 9:01 and I think Larry's recording, and as far as we know. Good. Okay.
I believe so. Yeah, we can get going.
Okay, great, thanks. First order on the agenda today, of course, is the November minutes. Did everyone get a chance to review those? Do we have any corrections? Or a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Carol approves. Do we have a?
I'll second.
Thank you, AJ. What, did someone else say something I missed?
And I think it was just Josh joining.
Okay. Hey, Josh.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. I will go through the roster and ask for each member to vote. So Greg, how do you vote?
I abstain. I didn't get the minutes for some reason. It's the same problem I've had before. Sorry.
All right, we'll make sure, we'll work on that and make sure you get those in the future. Carol made the motion. Michael, how do you vote?
Approve.
Donna?
Approve.
Scott is not here. Sharon?
Approve.
AJ made the second, and Joshua.
Approve.
That item passes.
Thank you. Greg, I didn't realize you weren't getting information.
I'm getting information. I'm getting notices and the materials, and then they disappear on my email listing. And this has happened several months in a row. I go back to try to find the meeting link and the attached materials, and they are gone. So only way I logged on this morning was going back to a September meeting that I was able to put into a folder. So I am totally mystified by this. So I apologize again that but I have no idea. It's very odd, and it happened several times. I know Matthew's getting tired of sending me multiple copies of meeting notices and materials, but I decided not to bother him this morning with it again. So.
Okay.
Don't worry about that. Please do bother me if you need anything.
Well, I would offer to help, but I'm quite positive that I would have no help to offer other than commiseration over technology.
I don't know. I don't know what to
do.
I don't know what to say. It is very odd. Because I remember Matthew just sending out a notice a few days ago with the materials, and went back to try to find it. It's gone. It's just gone. It's not there. So.
Well, we're glad you made it. You made extra effort too, so we'll count that.
Okay, all right.
And Sharon, before we get into the discussion, I just wanted to announce that we also have Kelly Garvin with the Winston-Salem Department of Transportation joining us, and then Dexter Vines as well from Winston-Salem Transit Authority. So, Dexter, thank you for joining us, and Kelly, you too.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Our meetings, reason why I haven't been on here because our meetings have changed to the same time and date. And unfortunately, our meeting was canceled today, so I decided to join.
And Dexter, I think your role at WISTA, the discussion that the group is going to have today about education and messaging may be relevant to the work there. So there may be some opportunities for coordination with that. So just wanted to let everybody know.
Okay.
Yeah, Dexter, you joined us for some of our early meetings, but we probably didn't give you ample time to really introduce yourself and what your role is. I think it'd be helpful to hear what that is and what you're responsible for, and maybe even kind of if you have a hope for how we engage going forward or something that we could support, that would be great to hear as well, if you'd like to do that. Don't mind.
Okay. This started out, I met Matthew because we had a campaign last year about pedestrian and cyclist awareness. So the city of Winston-Salem hooked me up with Matthew. I thought it would be a good idea if I joined this committee to keep the lines of communication open between what the cyclists and pedestrians and their awareness as far as our safety here at Winston-Salem Transit. So the ideas and the job or the campaigns that y'all are doing, I'll relate it back to my general manager and keep the lines of communication open between what this committee is trying to do, where the bike lanes are going to be changing or new bike lanes putting up, so we can make our drivers more aware of the cyclists and the pedestrian activity out in the streets of Winston-Salem. So I am the safety manager here at Winston-Salem Transit.
Safety manager. Okay. Thank you. And you guys have made a lot of changes over the years in partnership with cyclists and pedestrians too. So just for my own information, I think it'd be helpful to hear if the group is not aware, and I think I'm like partially aware. You can take a bike on our city buses. Is that all buses and all routes?
Well, for now, we have two different types of routes. So, or two different types of transportation. We have fixed route transportation, which is the public transportation, the big buses. Then we have TransAid transportation, that is for disabled clients. So you can bring a bus on the, not inside of the fixed routes, but they have a bike rack on the front of the bus that cyclists can put their bike on the front of the bus and ride the city buses, the fixed route buses. There are no bike racks on the TransAid buses, but you are able to ride the bus with a bike and put your bike on the fixed route buses.
And then you've also been doing some great work around town at enhancing some of the bus stops with new covers and benches and some artwork, which I really applaud. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so recently we've changed some of the routes. I've only been here since February of 2020. So
Okay.
when I got here and I rode some of the routes and I saw some of the things that kind of wasn't safe to me, like buses doing U-turns and bus stops not in good locations for our riders. So we've been working on that. We've changed a lot of the routes, and we put a lot more bus stops out for the pedestrians and the cyclists to be able to ride the fixed routes. So the buses are no longer doing U-turns. We went to a bus stop only campaign. When I got here, you could catch a bus pretty much anywhere, you know, without it being at a bus stop, and that was baffling to me. So changed that and made it to where you have to be in the vicinity of the bus stop to be able to ride the buses. So we're still doing that, and we're still putting, so they added a lot of bus stops, and they changed some of the routes to make them more safer for the pedestrians and the cyclists that we provide transportation for also. So it's an ongoing process. We haven't finished everything, but it has made it a lot safer for the clients that we provide transportation for, and our drivers.
Oh, that's great. And then also on the TransAid, I'm sure you were involved in creating the pedestrian plan and some of the improvements on sidewalk cutouts and extended sidewalks and that kind of thing. Do you want to share anything specific to TransAid?
For TransAid is a whole different situation because they're everywhere. They drive everywhere, so they really have to be safe. Some of the apartment complexes we found that doesn't have wheelchair accessibility. So we have to get in touch with the managers and find out where they can put cutouts there for wheelchair accessibility. Before I got here, you could call TransAid and get approved to ride TransAid. So when I got here from my previous location, we had to do site assessment, what are called site assessment. That's when the safety manager or the safety supervisor goes out. Somebody wants to, I take you through the process. Somebody needs our service. They call, make an appointment. People from TransAid or what we have, the call center, they'll call us and say, okay, we have a client that wants to ride our bus. We'll go out, look at their address or look at where they're trying to get picked up from to make sure that our bus can get in and out of there safely, that they have the correct accessibility to get on our bus so they can get door-to-door service or curb service. Door-to-door service is when our driver goes to the door and assists the clients to the bus. Curb to curb is where door-to-door is not available, whether the parking lot is too crowded or too small or the bus can't get in there and turn around. So they have to meet us at the curb, and then we'll provide service from the curb to their location. So with TransAid, since they go everywhere, it's really difficult sometimes to assess their safety. So with these site assessments, everyone from when I started, every new client, they had to have a site assessment before they can ride or be approved to ride our bus, and we'll give them door to door. We in the safety department will deem if they're going to be door to door or curb to curb. So that makes it safe for everybody. You know, the drivers, they don't have to go, because when I first got here, the drivers were backing down dead end streets to pick up clients. So that was really, they're gonna have to back down 200 feet, some even more than that, just to get down there because they couldn't turn around. So a lot of clients with dead ends, we'll go out and say, well, okay, they're gonna have to, unfortunately, they're gonna have to meet us at the top of the street to make it safe for both the client and the driver. So that has changed a lot too. So the site assessments have really made it safe for the pedestrians and the drivers also.
That's great. And then from a communication standpoint, are there any particular like messages that you try to get out into the community around anything really, safety awareness? How do you get new route information out, those kinds of things?
Well, we have a telemarketing person here, Miss Tina. And all the changes that we do, she puts it on social media. She makes the flyers. If there's bus stops that's not going to be uh, serviced because of some street closing or something, we'll go out, put signs up on the bus stop saying this bus stop will be closed for this amount of time. She's real good at that. She does all our communication with the public about getting information out that's either changing or, things that we're going to work on. She gets that information out. So she has a good, she's been here for a long time. She helps me out a lot with stuff, getting information out to the public.
That's great. I know while I was with Novant, there was a big push around getting increased routes and Sunday service and some of those kinds of things for employees who use public transportation to get to work. And whenever there were routes added or changes made, we worked pretty closely with you guys to distribute that, and it would go out in internal communications to all employees and that kind of thing. And it was always kind of a celebration because we did, that's a really important service for the hospitals, medical practices, and that kind of thing. So I appreciate all that's been done.
Thank you. That's one of the reasons why I needed to be on this committee, so we can keep that line of communication open of what's going on in the city with the safety of our cyclists and pedestrians.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for being here. And Kelly, kind of the same for you. I know you join our meetings, but kind of stay in the background, but I'd love for you to do just a quick introduction and kind of reminder of what your role is. And again, if there's anything that you're excited about as you listen in, or if you have questions you maybe think we could consider that we haven't yet as we're diving into these communication conversations, relationship and networking.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Kelly Garvin. I am the Planning Development Coordinator for the Winston-Salem MPO and the city. What I do mostly is one of the things that I do is kind of manage MPO funding that we utilize to fund projects throughout the MPO. And some of those processes is how we fund bicycle and pedestrian projects. For the city of Winston-Salem specifically. So I kind of wear two hats. I work for the city and the MPO at large. I think one of the things that listening to you guys talk about your communication strategy, I think one of the things that we struggle with the most has always been how to reach the public and make sure that, they are aware of what we're doing, the plans that we're putting forth. Because it's nothing worse than having a public meeting about some future plans and then coming to actually execute the plan, and people come out and say we don't like it. We say, well, we had a meeting, we talked about this, we at length, and nobody came. And so I'm excited about seeing how you guys are going to help us with that specific issue. And honestly, I always tell Matthew, the bicycle and pedestrian community always shows up. They are my favorite because y'all always show up to meetings and voice your opinion and help guide us through processes. But I'm also excited to maybe steal some ideas from you guys to use for some of our other projects that are not necessarily bike bed projects that also need attention from the public. So.
That's great. Communication is a funny thing, and we all get siloed and we all absorb information and find information in different ways. And I first joined Novant in marketing, and I had a lot of physician practices and had to get them to try to come to events. And it was almost like I had 600 physicians and had to communicate 600 different ways. You had to know which ones used this email address or which one went through their practice manager and which one needed paper and which one needed this. And that's true for all people, right? We all live in our own lanes and do things the way we do things. And to communicate with the public, that can look like a million different things at one time. So I get it. Thank you. So that's really, it's really what we're trying to do with this is just try to map out what networking looks like and how that can be successful to the extent that we're able to control that. We obviously did not get questions out to those of you who had volunteered to have conversations, but there has been activity. There was a group that had agreed to review the questions, and I think we've gotten that list to where we want it. We made some edits. AJ did some online research, which I could probably spend hours looking at. We're going to map that into a document that will show some comparisons. And AJ, I'd love for you to talk about that in just a second, if you don't mind. And then Carol has created a list. So we're gonna ask people to raise their hands kind of again. And we've got 5 locations, I think, that we're gonna divvy out. We'll include Scott in that since he had volunteered. But hopefully the plan is that we can have some preliminary conversations with the North Carolina-based bicycle pedestrian committees that we're connected to, sort of pull that together with what AJ found online and what we'll find out in these conversations and learn from those who've been around longer. I mean, some of these groups have been around 20 years, some are a little newer. They all kind of sit in a different space within sort of the framework within those municipalities. And then from that, we can sort of create our own path. So I'll pause on that. AJ, is there anything you'd like to share just on kind of a general overview or things that stood out in that online research?
I think there are, I guess, 5 cities that we kind of focused on now. I think 2 things, I guess, that kind of stuck out a lot. They are all different to some degree, but a lot of them are kind of joint ventures of the city and county, or the MPO. And so a lot of them have members appointed by the city, and then some members appointed by kind of the broader county. That's obviously not how we are set up, but I think it's interesting context and could influence, their scope and kind of some of the different departments and agencies that they work with. So that'll be interesting to hear when we talk to them. The other thing that kind of stuck out was several of them have formal committees or subcommittees within them. So we've talked about some different initiatives we want to focus on, but they kind of already have these formal subcommittees broken out that do meet regularly, separately from the entire commission or committee. Raleigh, for instance, has planning, community outreach, and policy subcommittees. Durham has development review. The second one's education, encouragement, and engagement. So that would kind of go along with this communication idea we've been talking about. And then the third subcommittee for them is bike and pedestrian plan implementation and evaluation. And that would really align with what we spent a couple months on a while back going over the bicycle master plan. So it doesn't seem that they're focused on wildly different things than us, which is good and validating, but they have, since they've been around longer, kind of formally organized around some of those initiatives, and kind of split their groups up to focus on them, it seems. So I think it'll be interesting to hear how they've done that and how that works for them.
Yeah, thank you. Carol, anything you'd like to add or throw in? Carol has been kind enough to kind of divide out the questions, add AJ's research. So for each person who volunteers, you're going to get AJ's research on that location, and then the list of questions. You can back out the ones that are duplicated. Anything you want to throw in, Carol?
I'm not sure that AJ said this specifically, but we're kind of newbies in this arena. Most of these organizations have been around for many years, some of them dating back to the early 2000s. So I think there, as AJ said, we've got a lot that we can learn from them as we have these conversations and dialogue. So I'm excited that we're getting close to being able to reach out to them.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, hey, Sharon.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one other thing that I found. Several of them have readily available on either their subpage on the city site or wherever their information is kind of stored. But several of them set annual goals that are kind of aligned with, you know, whatever original mission the commission was set up under. But I thought that was interesting and maybe a good idea for us to consider, you know, as we probably won't be doing it today as we head into 2022, but if it's something we wanted to try to get in place early next year to kind of outline everything we want to accomplish over the next 12 months. I thought that was a really neat thing to see. And then they put together generally annual reports that kind of talk about what they did accomplish looking back on those goals.
Oh, I like that too. Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things I'd like to throw out, maybe we can spend a few minutes on, is we also want to have some community-based conversations. And so those questions I think need to look a little bit different with our community organizations. And we also need to remember, or this is for myself, remember to include non-cycling based groups. So I think Dexter reminded me of that in his introduction a little bit ago, but I'm pretty sure we had some volunteers who specifically said this, but if we could get a group to look at that, and it may be January, I realize the holidays are coming up, but just to look at the questions and maybe carve out some that should be a little bit different for the community groups. And Carol has put together a long list, but if we could get a group like we did this time to look at that outside of our meeting, pull those questions together and then kind of highlight 3 to 7 groups that we should have conversations with, that would be great.
Hey, I'd be part of that group.
Great, thank you.
As long as it's after the first of the year, I can be on it.
Okay, yeah. I think that's very fair. And Greg, I had actually thrown your name, and I think, Josh, I'd like to include you in this. The two of you would actually be good to be interviewees, to share some information from past experiences, groups you're involved with. Like Greg, you've been involved in so many initiatives locally, and Josh, you have that history as well. And Michael, you know, some of our own committee members, to share from their perspective, in addition to, you know, Cycling Advocacy Network and some of these other groups that we've identified outside of our committee as well. Okay,
Yeah,
so we'll move forward.
I'd be glad to participate.
Thank you, Greg. We'll move forward with that plan. And if it's okay with you guys, unless you have a particular attachment to one of the locations, can we just sort of assign and send you the questions and let you coordinate? I'd love to get at least an email out to those point of contacts before the holidays. If you get lucky and nab some time before then, that's great. But realistically, I'm assuming it'll probably be January. You okay if we just assign for those who agreed to have conversations? I think it's Donna, Michael, okay. No particular attachment. Okay, great. Carol, is there anything you need before we divvy those out?
Just the contact information for Greensboro and Asheville.
Oh, okay. Matthew, can you help us get those?
I can, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So
Okay,
and Sharon, are you wanting us to? Oh, I think you said that you would make the assignments.
I can, we can just, I'll
Or
confirm the list of names.
or do you want us to volunteer for the city we want to take?
No, I think nobody had a particular attachment, so we'll just randomly assign.
Okay.
That works. Okay. And I think we have 5. Donna, Michael, are you still okay to be one of those people? Joshua, Scott, she's not here today. It's already 4. And then AJ, do you want to make a phone call? You've done a lot. AJ's good with that too. Is that 5?
Yeah, you can.
Thank you. Anything else around that for right now? Okay, great. So we actually have 30 minutes for updates and general conversation. Matthew, if you want to start, if you want to update on the Public Works Committee, that's been moved, and then anything else that you know around some of the recommendations we've made this year, any movement or feedback on those?
So the first part of that, the work that this group has done on prioritizing the recommendations from the bicycle master plan. So we will present that item. The plan is to take that to the Public Works Committee of the City Council in January. So we're refining those materials now, and Sharon and Carol, as the chair and vice chair, you'd certainly be welcome to attend that meeting and speak on behalf of the group and kind of detail some of the work that the group has done this year. So that should be the second Tuesday in January at 6 o'clock. That's the Public Works Committee meeting time. So we're on schedule for that. And Sharon, what was the second part of that question?
I guess the second part would just be an update on the pedestrian plan. Do you know where things are with that?
You mean in terms of adoption or implementation?
Yeah, I guess we made our kind of formal, we agree, and then it was going to go to city council, but anything.
So it was adopted, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So so that was adopted. We have that plan has a prioritized list of projects in it already. So we can start plugging those items into the discussion about how to move forward with some of those projects, whether they go into the capital improvement plan for the city, whether they need some further evaluation, some engineering analysis. But yeah, that is adopted, and we can start moving ahead with some of those projects. And some of them that were priorities are projects that are underway already. So Siles Creek Parkway was one of the priorities within that plan, and that's a project that's currently in design. We have projects on University Parkway. There were a number of other corridors that were priorities in that plan that already have projects underway. So there is some work already taking place.
Great.
And I should mention intersection improvement projects as well. So the plan, the pedestrian plan, it made recommendations for corridors that need sidewalk, but also for intersections. There was a prioritized list of intersections that need improvements for crosswalks, pedestrian signals, and those types of facilities. So we have a number of those intersection projects in design right now and actually under construction.
That's great. And I know that from your end, you see projects underway all the time, but those intersection improvements and, the share markers and bike lanes, things that are really visible, and those bus stop enhancements, and that must feel like a point of celebration for you and the folks on those teams to be able to see such visible progress.
Sure. Yeah. I think that as you all know, the development of those projects takes a long time. Sometimes years to go from a plan to final construction. So, some of the projects that we're working on now have been things that projects that we had identified a couple of years ago, if not more. So yeah, it's nice to see those. And just one quick update. I know that the last two corridors, as part of our most recent bike lane and shared lane marking package, are underway now. So Hawthorne Road and then Northwest Boulevard and 14th Street. So those are, we're working with contractor right now to work on pre-lining. So we go out and they will pre-line those roads to kind of do a temporary marking for where those pavement markings should go, the final versions. And so they're out there doing that right now, and we'll work with them and review those, make sure they're accurate, and then they will go ahead with the final markings after that. So so the timing with our next set of bicycle priorities, the timing is great on that because we're finishing up our most recent round of projects. So we'll be ready to move ahead with the next batch then.
That's great. Thank you. And then we have not yet shared with the committee, correct, about the grant for Long Branch.
And that's right. I think we had gotten the notification from USDOT after our meeting, I believe. So just to let you all know, we did not receive the RAISE grant for the Long Branch Trail. Just some background on that. Back in July, we had submitted an application to USDOT for a RAISE grant, which formerly it's the transportation grant that's available. It previously had been called Tiger, and I think in the last administration it was called Build, and now the current administration is called RAISE. And it's been the same program basically with maybe some different priorities, but we had submitted the Long Branch Trail extension, so from Martin Luther King Jr. Drive to 25th Street through that program. And in November, we had gotten notification that we did not receive that award. And we had requested, it was about $8 million or so to build that trail, that segment of trail. So we did not receive that. And so the next step for us is to have a meeting with USDOT officials about the application and get some feedback on what would help that application in the future. So it's not uncommon for communities to submit for that grant multiple times. And I know, as an example, Durham, I think, was awarded this year for one of their projects, but I believe it was the third time they had submitted it. So we'll continue to work on that. We'll get some feedback on the project and the application, and look for opportunities in the future to submit again.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. On a
question.
Well, oh, go ahead. Yeah, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those. On a positive note, we just had received notification from the League of American Bicyclists that we are renewed at the bronze level as a bicycle friendly community. So we did not move up to the silver designation, which is one of our goals, but we did maintain our status as a bronze level community. And again, with that award, there is feedback that we'll get from the League of American Bicyclists, and use that feedback to help us in our planning for jumping to that next level in the future. And I believe a lot of it comes down to building additional infrastructure and then encouraging more ridership. So I think those are really the two keys to getting to that next level. So if we can, if we keep building the infrastructure and we start encouraging more riders, we'll be in a better place to seek that silver designation.
That's great. Thanks.
How often does that application go out?
So you're required to renew it every 4 years, but if we have the option of applying annually if we would like. So let's say over the next year or two, we make really great strides and we have a lot of new infrastructure and we think we could attain that silver designation, we can apply before our 4-year period is up.
That's great. Any questions on those? Unless anyone has burning things they want to share, Carol had attended the North Carolina Bike Summit in Durham recently, and also had a conversation with Amy Easter from Winston-Salem Cycling Advocacy Network. And so, Carol, if you'd like to share anything from those two. I know you could talk about the summit for probably a full hour.
Yeah, I was looking for my notes. It's been a while. When you walk away from it, you tend to forget things. The summit was wonderful. As I've mentioned in other meetings, I'm kind of a newbie, so I am almost like standing in front of a fire hose and all the water's just spraying all over me, and I'm going to drown. But I am learning so much, and it's absolutely wonderful. But there is a lot going on in and around North Carolina, and I think some of these phone calls that we place with the other BPACs is going to introduce us to a lot of information, and then as we progress forward, the local connections and then maybe statewide connections for some of the other organizations will help educate us even more. But the Bike Walk North Carolina has recently introduced a training. It's called the North Carolina Bicycle Safety Quiz. And this is something, if we want sometime in the future, we could begin to introduce it to different organizations within Winston-Salem. But it's to, as you might imagine, increase safety. They have 4 modules. One is focused on large trucks on the road, and they suggested that we could introduce it to maybe training sites where people are getting educated on how to drive big trucks. So it could be a quiz that they take when they're doing that, and that has been done, I guess, in other states. This is replicated off of maybe Iowa, if I remember right. That's who they worked with closely to try to develop this. But then there's one for adult drivers. I think there's maybe, and I can't find it quickly in glancing. There's another one for kids. And I think that you can get a certification after you take the quiz. I have not gone in to take that quiz yet, but they did show us a video while we were there, while we attended the summit. And I think that that's something that we could look into for safety in the future if that's an arm that we want to focus on. They also had an individual from Washington, D.C. She is the Director of Health and PE for all of Washington, D.C. She's young, vivacious, lots of energy, as you might expect a PE coordinator to be. But they have introduced Bike in the Park, and it's a program for all second graders in Washington, D.C., where they have enough bikes to support half of the second grade classes each of the semesters. So they cover all second grades, all of the children in second grade, and they actually teach them to ride a bike by using balance bikes. And what was I going to say? Oh, I know. It was the point of reference. They said that since 1970, so if it started in 1970, that means we're at least a generation in there, or 2 generations, which means there's a lot of parents today that don't know how to ride a bike. And if they don't know how to ride a bike, then they don't teach their kids to ride a bike. So I think it's a wonderful program. She was the director, so she could implement that across the entire school system for Washington, D.C. There are similar programs that they covered another day at the summit that are going on across North Carolina, which I found fascinating as well. They had two speakers or two different groups of panelists, one from the western part of the state, another from the Charlotte area, where they are coordinating with Strider. And Strider has a foundation, and if you receive matching funds, they will, and I think it's just $5,000 per classroom. They will, and again, if you match the funds that they provide for the Strider bikes, they will provide the bikes to the school system. Charlotte has implemented it in, I believe, 4 of their classrooms. One of the things that they mentioned was in order to have success, you have to have PE teachers that want to do that. And the other trick, of course, is where do you store those bikes once you get them? But Strider has developed some wonderful bikes that you don't even have to air up the tires. And they are balanced bikes, and they focus on the younger kids. I can't remember if Charlotte is focusing on kindergarten or whether they're focusing on a higher grade. I'd have to go back and get it a little bit deeper in my notes. But I thought that those were interesting programs of things that are taking place across the state. They also had, kind of at the end of the session, a gentleman come in from the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And I forget his title right now, but it really, they changed his title within the last couple of years and named this director, but it's not really over Department of Transportation, it's integrated mobility or something like that. So they focus on more, and they want the public in North Carolina to know that the focus is broader than just cars. So I think that there's a lot of steps that are taking place that are very exciting. Again, all of you may know a lot about a lot of these programs, but it was all new to me and it was all very exciting. And I enjoyed attending the session. And cross my fingers, maybe if it's possible, I can attend the one in Washington, D.C. that's coming up in the spring. Let me see. Sharon, was there anything I shared with you that I forgot to mention?
I don't think so. I think those were those highlights I remember. That you mentioned the summit in Washington on the American League of American Bicycles. That looks like a really great event. I don't know if all of you get the league's newsletter. Really interesting information, advocacy, policy. Of course, they were very engaged around the infrastructure bill that passed recently. And then their summit is very affordable. They offer virtual and in-person options coming up next spring. I can share that or add that to the minutes so that you all have it as well.
I just want to add that, so we are the school district here, Karen Garman with school district. So Jefferson will be doing that Strider bike program. They're going to kind of pilot it, but she's really working hard to expand that throughout the schools. And I think she's really kind of set to focus with kindergartners at this point in time. So just
That's
one
great.
school's on the way. So
Excellent. Thanks, Michael.
You know, my next door neighbors have 3 children that are, I think 5th, 4th, and 2nd grade, and they don't ride bikes. And we were talking over the fence the other day. The mom, Becca, you know, like me, grew up. That was her favorite thing. You could always find me on my bike, just kind of freewheeling everywhere. And her kids are terrified. and just show no interest in riding. And my daughter's 23, and she was kind of the same way. And the family that lived there before, their son, who was the same age as my daughter, never really wanted to ride a bike. His older brother raced, was really involved in the cycling community, had been invited to go pro. And I'm not sure why that is, except that I guess in the world we live in, we do kind of get that negative news, and there is a lot of fear around cycling now as we hear about some of these, horrific accidents that have happened, especially this past year. I guess the flip side of that is that because of some of these accidents, like Las Vegas and what's happened recently in Texas, I don't know if you followed that story with the the 7 cyclists who were hit there, but it does drive change. Some of the things that Dexter talked about with transportation awareness, or having a module for truck drivers. What a great thing that is to just build awareness on all sides of the equation to protect lives. It is an interesting sort of conundrum.
And Sharon, since we're talking about the schools, just to let everybody know, we are, in the middle of our Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure project. So that is a project that we will be working on for the next 2 years. And really, we've had a Safe Routes to School program for the last decade or so, at plus more than a decade. And thanks in part to the National Cycling Center and Michael continuing the bike education program in the school. So we've worked with the PE director for the school system, Karen, and continue to take those bikes, that fleet of bikes, to the different schools and conduct bike safety training. So a lot of that work is going on here, maybe not to the level that you had mentioned, Carol, in DC, but we do have a fleet that we are taking to schools and working with the Safe Kids Coalition and the Winston-Salem Police Department, the National Cycling Center, to make sure the students are educated and then that they receive a properly fitted helmet in addition to that training. So, we hopefully with the current Safe Routes to School project that we have going on, we can expand that program and move it, beyond bike safety education and incorporate more pedestrian safety and more walking and biking encouragement in the schools.
Remind me, how many schools actively participate right now
in that program? Well, so the fleet of bikes that we have is we have 25 bikes, and basically each class gets those bikes for, Michael, is it 3 or 4 weeks usually?
Yeah, 2 to 3 weeks.
Right. Okay. So on average, those bikes visits, is it about 8 schools?
About 10 or 11 schools.
10 or 11 schools per year. So over the course of that program, I know we've had we must be approaching 10,000 students at this point that have gone through that program.
And I'll add, so that's those are elementary school, 4th and 5th grade predominantly. Some schools do 3rd grade, but also the National Cycling Center. We have two trailers with 30 plus bikes that we rotate within the high schools here in the community. So that's also going simultaneously, and that's been in effect for 4 years now.
Great, thanks. And I'm so glad you mentioned our police department. The Winston-Salem Police Department has been involved in cycling safety and supporting getting kids on bikes and getting helmets to kids for years. And that could be a really great guest to invite to a future meeting, to have someone from their team come share with us and listen and share with us as we build our network.
Yeah, we could certainly do that.
Speaking of, thanks, Joshua. Speaking of you, when Carol and I met with Matthew a couple of weeks ago, we had mentioned inviting Eddie McNeil to come attend one of our meetings. He's the Director of Marketing Communications for the city. Is that the right title?
That's correct.
Yeah, Joshua had mentioned Ed on our last meeting because he has done some video work. Actually saw him out filming when I went to get my booster shot at the health department a few weeks ago. So we took the liberty of asking Matthew to invite him as we talk about communications. I think it's really important to hear about how the city disseminates information and who they engage, how they manage social media, what role we can play in getting information or graphics or passing along this bike safety quiz or whatever it is to the city for distribution. Any word back from Ed, Matthew?
No, still working on that for a future meeting.
Okay. He's a fun personality to interact with anyway. I think he'll have a lot to share with us if we can get him pinned down and find a time that works out. Anything else that anyone would like to bring up as we head into 2022? Any events or campaigns that you're aware of that we might want to keep in mind?
Sharon, one thing, I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to mention that there's an event happening at the convention center next 3 days. It's a Love Out Loud gift mart that provides discounted or even free clothing and toys and so forth. But my involvement has been with the Cycle Recycle ministry and fixing up bikes. And we have about 200 bikes that we've been able to repair and or get brand new. And I went and picked up 200 helmets yesterday down in Lexington. So we're going to be giving away bikes at a very discounted rate and fitting the helmets on the kids at the convention center. And so it's for the next, I guess, 2.5 days and so forth. There's going to be bunches of kids that are going to come by and pick out a bike and get fitted with helmets and get some brochures and information. I think Luli Beckles, that probably a lot of you know, is heading that up. She's safety and well, that's probably not the right title, but she works through Baptist Hospital on child head injury traumas and things like that. And a lot of that is related to bicycling and kid safety and so forth. So I just wanted to mention that if you're downtown or something and you want to just come by and look at this event, is really something that I enjoy. This is my second year being involved with, and giving away bikes, having the kids be able to either get a bike directly or indirectly from their parents for Christmas, and get a brand new helmet. And so it's a nice way to end the year and to help kids ride safely and to get them started correctly. So I just wanted to mention that is something fun, and it's something that I think has a lot of value for low-income parents and disadvantaged families, and one way to reach out to them and hopefully get their kids active in riding and doing it safely. So.
That's great. Thank you, Greg.
I just want to say, so the Winston-Salem Cycling Classic Gears and Guitars is going to happen again in September. It's going to look a little bit different this year. I mean, very similar, but we're trying to incorporate a few other activities and stuff. And one of those is just, we're trying to make it more of a cycling centric event. I think maybe one of those days we're hoping to engage all the cycling organizations here in town and have kind of like if they want, a vendor presence, so to speak. That way they can just go out there and let people know that, hey, we're here, we're out in the community. If you're interested in getting involved with our organization. So we're working on just kind of developing, which we'd already been doing that in this group, developing that list of organizations and contacts. But I just wanted to say that's heavy in our plans for 2022. So
That's
Sounds
wonderful.
great. That could be a lot of fun. Okay. All right. Thank you all. We're at 10:01, so we'll wrap up. We'll get questions out to those who volunteered. Thank you so much for everything that's going on. I feel like we're making visible progress at this point, and it feels really good to be heading into 2022 with some plans in place and some action items. Hope you have safe and happy rest of the year, rest of December, and we'll see you in January.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.